everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I am making a card for my dad. It is for his birthday. He actually taught people how to fly for a hot minute, and he has always had a love for planes. So I purchased this stamp set many moons ago, and I think I use it on every single one of his birthday cards, so he's probably tired of seeing it by now, but I bought it specifically for him, so we're going to use it. This is the Plain and Simple stamp set from Fawn. I have a gathering of artist markers from Altenew. I went ahead and stamped these in some Gina K amalgum ink. I laid the images out one time, then flipped my cardstock and stamped them again, and then I took the clouds off because I wanted to have a few more clouds and just stamped those. I stamped each of the images twice, and then I set this aside to dry. I did go back and stamp in the greetings and the banners, and those are going to be my greetings for the card themselves. I have discovered if I don't let that Gina K amalgam ink dry for quite some time or make sure it's very heat set, it smears, and so that's why I went ahead and stamped that off screen. I have the Simple Stripes stamp set from Spellbinders, and I have an A2 size card panel in my MISTI here, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp this out. I'm going to attempt to make a semi-plaid background. We're going to see how it goes. It turned out fairly decent. I wanted to give my Stamp Market ink cube some love, so I'm going to use some of those. I've got Cobalt, Breeze, Ocean, and Navy here. And I have this Scene Builder stencil from Pea Designs, and it has like grasses and hills and trees and clouds and things that you could use as stars or moons and suns, that kind of thing. But I just want the cloud borders today, and I'm going to stencil those lightly with some Breeze ink, but we will first attempt to make our plaid background. The first ink I'm going to use here is the Navy, and I'm going to just use this little ink cube and stamp it down. I noticed that my stamp was kind of dirty, so I'm finding little random spots of who knows what on there. But I'm going to end up stamping this down, and I'm going to have to stamp this twice. I end up kind of missing a spot, and I just wanted to make sure it was a little more solid than what I was getting with that first stamping. I've never used this stamp set before, so I really wanted to make sure I had a good impression, and so sometimes that means you have to stamp it twice until that stamp is really conditioned, and it'll take ink a little bit better. So I do end up going back and using that same navy ink and stamping it twice. I cleaned that stamp off really good, and I rotated that cardstock 90 degrees. So there is a outline for a landscape A2 size panel on that waffle flower media grip mat there, and I laid my paper in that. And I realized that I was going to have to scoot this over and stamp this a couple more times just so that I could get this crosshatch here. And all I do is just scoot the cardstock over and make sure that my stripes line up. Whether I have to scoot the stamp up or down, it doesn't matter. I just try to make sure that I get that lined up so that we can get a continuous pattern from left to right. I could have done that going the first direction as well with that navy ink. I just didn't think of it at the time and didn't want to fool with it. So, but I did want to make sure I had a little bit more real estate to work with for the layout I have in mind. So I knew I needed to do this one and get it all the way across from left to right. So here you can see I've scooted the cardstock down and the stamp up and just made sure that those stripes are lining up, and then I'm going to ink them up. And I think I ink them up 2 or 3 times just so that I can get that good solid impression and it looks continuous from top to bottom now. And I will do that same thing for the bottom, just scooting the stamp and the cardstock around to ensure that I have a continuous pattern from top to bottom here. So now I have just offset that stamp so that there is going to be some stripes between the navy. And I used the Cobalt, Ocean, and Navy for this particular part of the stamping. And all I did, like I said, is just scooted the stamp around so that there was going to be stripes in between the navy stripes. I could have done it to where there were stripes in between the other ones, but I liked this better. and my cardstock was already in this orientation for the most part, so it worked out just fine. And I don't think that I scooted this one around. I think I just left it as is, yeah. So that is our little homemade DIY pattern paper. Is it necessarily a plaid or a checkered? Not necessarily, but it'll work. So in order to clean that waffle flower grip mat and the stamp, I'm just using some regular stamp cleaner that I've made. And I have the scrubber block from Hero Arts. I love that thing. It is phenomenal. Love it. This is the second mat I've used. The scrubber pads are replaceable, and this is the second one that I'm on, and I use them all the time for everything. So they last a good long while. The only reason why I took that one off is because it was starting to like curl up at the edges and not stay on there anymore. Otherwise, I would have continued to use it. So now we're going to make what are going to be the inside panels of our card here. And we're going to have to do this step twice. So this is going to be for the interactive portion of our card. And so when you open the card, I want it to look like this plane is flying in the clouds. And so I'm going to have to do this twice. And all I'm doing is using that Pea Designs Scene Builder stencil and just kind of sliding that stencil cloud section around and super, super, super lightly blending with that Breeze ink. This is exactly what I wanted. I wanted there to be some interest in the background, but I didn't want it to distract from this fun interactive element that we're going to make. So all I'm going to do, like I said, is just kind of scoot this around. There's two different cloud borders on this stencil, but you can actually make it before. So if you do the one, two, and then flip the stencil, you can end up having like 4 kind of patterns, but I just stuck with the 2 and just shifted. And like I said, I'm repeating this twice, and I'm going to cut these panels down. Right now they're 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to cut them down to 4 by 5 1/4. And we're going to glue these flat to the inside of our card on either side of the score line. Just glue them flat with liquid glue. For that pattern paper that we made, I am just trimming off the sides that don't have the continual complete pattern. And that's going to give me a better idea on what kind of area I have to work with. So the next thing I want to do is I don't want this straight up and down. I want it kind of at an angle just to give the front of the card a little bit more movement. And this is going to be part of the front of the card. Just to give it a little bit more movement and a little more interest. And so I've tilted it, and I know that that top right corner of the card is where that's as far down as I can go before you can actually see the top of the card. So I'm trying to determine, I want this to be matted, and I'm trying to see which of these inks I want to use as a matte. But I end up using my alcohol markers from Altenew to create kind of like my own colored cardstock. And that's a tip I have for you. So if you are not one to use colored cardstock, maybe your budget doesn't allow for it, maybe you just don't have the room to store all of the colors, but you have markers, you have crowns, you have watercolors, you have acrylic paints, colored pencils, Sharpies, whatever it is. You can use those to create your own colored cardstock, and you can use those to match whatever project it is that you're using. So I just briefly like swiped the ink onto this scrap piece of cardstock, scrap piece of paper here, and I'm trying to see which of my artist markers looks good or matches as closely to one of those colors. I could do like a direct to paper with these ink cubes, but I don't have refills for these. And so I try to be kind of frugal with my ink when I don't have an ink refill for it. So the only ink pads that I typically keep refills for are my full-size ink pads. So that includes my Distress Oxides, my Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink line, and my Concord and Ninths. Those are the only ones that I have refills for. So I would be willing to do like a direct to paper method for those, but not for these because I don't have the refills, and that does take quite a bit of ink. But that is an option to give yourself some more pattern paper. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of scribble on some of this artist marker. I don't remember which one this is, but it's, I've got Sea Breeze, Turquoise, Starlight, Tide Blue, and then I'm going to bring in some pure graphite charcoal soot. I do that later though. So for this, I'm just scribbling on some of this ink that I felt matched the colors in the pattern paper we made, and just going to test it to see if that's enough that I want, if that gives me enough showing. And then we're going to kind of trim this out so I know exactly what I have to work with. And I'm just going to use scissors to trim around the edges of this so that I know exactly what I have to work with. But I'm going to glue this down to that cardstock first, just with some liquid glue. I know I want one of my planes down here with their banner, and so that'll give me plenty of room with that border and that pattern paper we've made. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this down flat. You could pop this up with some foam tape or scrap cardstock, or mess up stampings that you've done. You could definitely do that. But I'm just going to glue it down flat with some liquid glue, and then I will let this dry, and then I'm going to trim off the excess with my scissors. For the images, I just did flat color. I didn't do any shading, anything fancy. One of the things that I did want to show you is that I picked two colors that were too close together. They didn't give any difference. So the propeller and like the, I don't know, plane anatomy or configuration, but the part that holds the propeller onto the plane, there was not enough like difference of color there. So I am taking a Master's Touch blender and going over that several times just to kind of take up some of that color. It's called a blender, but it almost acts like an eraser, for lack of better words, but it is going to soften that and lighten that color a little bit so that there is some more difference in the color between the propeller and the big old bolt, I guess you could say, that holds the propeller on the plane. And then I did put a little dot of that on the hubcap of the wheel there, and did some more of that blending with that Master's Touch blender pen. And those two colors that I chose for the propeller and the wheel and that kind of stuff, that is the pure graphite and the charcoal soot. But again, I would choose a different color for at least one of those, just so that you can get a little more variation. You don't have to kind of do damage control, for lack of better words, later on. So here I'm showing you that. It's at this point that I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these out and trim off the excess of this card front we made. I went ahead and die cut everything out with its coordinating dies, and now I'm applying some Dollar Tree foam squares to the back of one of the planes and then one of the banners, and I'm using the banner that says "You're the Best," and this is going to go on the front of the card, kind of in that white blank space there. You could put more clouds there, you could stencil clouds there, you could put the die cuts there, you could put a grass there so where it looks like maybe it's taking off. I just wanted to keep it kind of simple, so that your big wow factor comes when you open the card. So I'm going to take off the backers of this, but I'm not going to put this on the card yet, just because I want to have a fairly flat surface to do kind of the interactive building that's going to happen on the inside of the card. So what I have here is a die set from Concord in 9th, and this is called Pop-Up Base Dies. There's 3 different sizes in here, and all these do, I chose the middle one. No, I lied. I chose the smallest one. And it has a score line in the middle, and then it has these 2 score lines on either side of the flap. So what that does is you're going to apply glue on kind of those like feet, and you're going to make sure that that center score line goes along the center part of your card. And the only place that you're going to apply any adhesive, so that what I'm folding right here is where it's going to go on the center of your card on the score line, and then these feet are the only places that are going to get the glue. And that is going to give you a place to apply whatever it is. Here I'm using clouds and a plane, but you could do unicorns and clouds, you could do critters, you could do flowers, you could do people, whatever you want to have kind of pop up. You could absolutely lose that. So I'm just going to apply some liquid glue to these bottom feet, and then these are ready to go ahead and start applying my elements. So I'm going to do a couple of things to adhere these elements, but one of the things that I want to be very, very cautious of is that I don't have anything crossing over those feet. So here I'm showing you that when you fold the card, those feet stay put, and there's really like very little bulk to this at all. I used some thinner weight cardstock here. I think this is like 80 pound from Paper Studio. That's a good thin weight to give you a good base here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I have already stuck my happy birthday banner to my plane, and I'm just going to start gluing some of these clouds on. I discovered that I wanted to have some things be a little bit higher. So I just took some scrap acetate and cut it into little strips. You can call them acetate picks if you like. And I'm going to use some 1/8 inch kind of score tape to attach my picks to the images and the picks to the pop-up bases here. I do a lot of test fitting just to make sure that I like the height, that you can't see my adhesive, that no adhesive is showing, no adhesive is exposed so that it doesn't cause the card not to open correctly or things to rip. And I do a lot of testing here just to ensure. So here I'm showing you that all that this is attached to is the top of that little wheel and the base of that pop-up. And I'm trying to make sure that you cannot see anything when the card is closed. So there's nothing like sticking out at the top or the side. If there was, I would want to move things around a little bit to just make sure that there's no spoiler alerts. You're not able to see what's going to be on the inside of the card when the card is closed. So now it's just a matter of kind of building a little scene here. I want this plane to look like it is up in the clouds and it is flying high with my happy birthday to my dad. So one of the things that you want to be very, very cautious of is that nothing goes over or goes inside of that crease that goes on your score line. If you do, you're going to either struggle to get the card to open, or whatever element you put that goes over that score line is going to have a crease in it. So if that doesn't bother you, then you don't have to necessarily worry about that. But I didn't want anything to have like a weird crease to it, so I wanted to make sure that I had nothing going over that score line there. I was just very cautious of that. So I'm just going to continue to build out this scene using a variety of acetate picks and just liquid glue. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and stick on the airplane with its "You're the Best" banner on the front using those foam squares that we put on there. And then when you open the card, boom. Isn't that so fun? I think that's so fun. So it doesn't look like a very spectacular anything fun or exciting in the beginning, but then once you open the card, you just get this fun little scene that pops up. This plane is flying high with a banner waving in the wind telling you happy birthday. I just think that's wonderful. And here I'm showing you that there is really not very much bulk at all to this. You would not have to pay extra postage. It's not very thick at all. I put this in a regular A2 size envelope, and I didn't put any extra padding or anything like that on there. And there is plenty of room in this card to just write your sentiment, your personal greeting. One of the things that I wanted to add is a little bit of sparkle. Yes, this is for my dad. Do I want it to be like super in your face glittery? No. But if you've ever seen like planes, particularly like old school planes, they almost look like they are sparkling in the sunlight. And I wanted this plane to sparkle for my dad. So I am going to apply some of that just kind of randomly to these clouds and then all over the plane again. I could have put some on the banners, but I chose not to. And then this is the card complete. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope you felt inspired. This is a very simple and economical die set, and it packs just a wonderful punch and is very versatile to use, easy to use. And you can put anything in here that you desire. So I hope you felt inspired to maybe make an interactive card, or maybe make your own pattern paper, whatever it is. But I thank you for spending time with me today, and we'll see you next time.